The first time I saw her marching up my gravel driveway in her pressed beige slacks and oversized sunglasses, I knew I was in for it. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I dared to build something without kissing the ring. "Excuse me," she called out, waving a manila folder like it was a court summons. "You can't just throw up a shack and call it a cabin. This is clearly in violation of HOA Code Section 14.2. Her name was Marlene, and she was exactly what you'd expect from someone who chaired the Architectural Review Committee of our HOA. Middle-aged, overconfident, and obsessed with enforcing power she didn't actually have. She once warned my neighbor for having too many decorative rocks. The guy had 4. I leaned against the porch railing of the cabin I'd just finished building at the back of my property, coffee in hand, enjoying the mountain air that didn't reek of entitlement like Marlene did. "Marlene," I said, "this is private land. The HOA doesn't extend back here." She flipped through her papers like she was about to read me my rights. "As of the latest boundary amendment, your parcel is within the expanded jurisdiction. You were sent a letter." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I never received one." "Well, it was sent, and this structure," she pointed at the cabin like it had personally insulted her, "is not up to code. No permits submitted, no designs reviewed. This is a clear violation." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "You sure you want to go down this road?" She crossed her arms. "Absolutely. This entire thing may need to be torn down." "Okay," I said, setting my coffee on the railing. "Let me save you some time." I reached into the mailbox attached to the side of the cabin and pulled out a laminated document. I walked it over and handed it to her. Her eyes scanned the page, then widened. "Wait, this says you approved the structure." "Yourself," she said, voice cracking. "Yep," I said. "I'm Adler Grant, newly elected member of the county zoning board. Appointed last month." Her jaw opened like a fish gasping for air. You're that Grant." "The very same. And this land was never covered by your HOA until that shady boundary expansion you pushed through last week. Which, by the way, is being reviewed by County Council for procedural violations." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, no words came out. "Oh," I added, "and this cabin, fully permitted. I signed off on it myself after running it through legal and environmental checks. It's all on file." She stood there frozen, one hand still holding the manila folder like it could protect her from the embarrassment washing over her. "I'd suggest you stop harassing me on private land," I said. "Because next time, I won't just hand you paperwork, I'll hand you a trespass notice." Marlene didn't say a word. She turned around and stomped down the gravel, her shoes crunching like angry little beetles. I watched her go, then picked up my coffee again. Some people build cabins. Others build walls of red tape. I built both. 3 days later, a white SUV with tinted windows pulled into my main driveway and parked just shy of the garage. I was at the edge of the property line, installing motion sensor lighting near the back trail that led to the lower creek. I took my time getting up to the house. No one who shows up unannounced in a vehicle like that is ever in a hurry for anything good. When I rounded the corner, a man in a fleece vest and polished loafers was standing next to the SUV, flipping through a leather-bound notebook. A woman slightly younger than Marlene stood beside him, arms folded, wearing a gold HOA badge clipped to her blouse like it made her a federal agent. "Mr. Grant?" the man asked, looking up from his notes without offering a hand. "You're on my property," I said flatly. "I'm Daniel Withers." "HOA Council, this is Secretary Caldwell." He nodded toward the woman, who didn't blink, just stared at me like she was trying to memorize my height for an affidavit. "Let me guess," I said. "You're here because Marlene didn't like being told no." Daniel ignored the jab. "There's concern your recent construction violates architectural conformity standards. Your cabin doesn't match the established character of the neighborhood." "You mean the neighborhood I'm not legally part of? That's under review." "No," I said. "That's under investigation by the county. And possibly the state, depending on what they find in the meeting records." Secretary Caldwell finally spoke. We have received formal complaints from 4 residents about the visual obstruction, the atypical roofing material, and you're going to lecture me about roofing. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. I've seen 5 homes in this neighborhood with blue tarps stapled to their rafters for 2 winters. Daniel closed his notebook and gave me the kind of look lawyers save for clients who cost more to defend than they are worth. We're not here to argue. We're here to notify you that the HOA intends to fine you for non-compliance. $2,500 with additional daily penalties if the structure remains. I reached into the crate by the porch, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to him without a word. He opened it, read the first few lines, and his jaw twitched. "That's a cease and desist," I said. "Filed with the county clerk. It references your overreach and the HOA's unlawful attempt to annex private parcels through procedural misfilings. If you proceed with fines, I will file an injunction." Caldwell stepped forward. "You're threatening litigation over a shed. That's a registered dwelling, and I'm not threatening anything, I'm promising." Daniel took a slow breath, folded the letter carefully, and tucked it into his notebook. "We'll review this with our legal team. You should also review the HOA's amendment vote from last month," I added. "2 of the board members who signed off on the boundary expansion don't legally reside in the neighborhood. Their ballots are invalid." "Which means your amendment is, too." Caldwell's expression cracked just slightly, her brow twitching toward panic. They left without another word. That evening, I drove into town and stopped by the county records office. I'd already requested the HOA's filings through a public records request, but I wanted to see if anything new had come in. The clerk, a retired schoolteacher named Lenora, handed me a folder as thick as a phone book. "Someone's been busy," she said. "They just dumped 50 pages this morning." All marked urgent. I flipped through them at the counter, meeting minutes, redacted notes, and a hastily typed amendment labeled Supplemental Jurisdiction Clarification. I recognized Marlene's signature at the bottom, but something else caught my eye. An email chain between the HOA president and a developer. I scanned it twice to be sure. The HOA board had been in talks with a real estate firm planning to build 6 luxury homes just beyond the ravine. The fake boundary extension. It was a setup. They wanted to absorb surrounding land, enforce code compliance, and sell access to the developer as exclusive HOA-authorized parcels. My land was in the way. I took pictures of everything. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in 6 years. "Adler Grant," came the voice on the other end. "Either you're running for office again, or someone's about to regret underestimating you." "Hey, Chief," I said, "you still at the DA's office? Still running the fraud division? What do you have?" "Evidence of a coordinated attempt to manipulate property access through fraudulent HOA expansion. They're trying to carve parcels into sellable lots under false pretenses. You have documentation, emails, signatures, meeting minutes, and confirmation that 2 board members who voted don't live within the required boundaries." He paused. "How soon can you bring it in?" "Already on my way." By the time I got to the county courthouse, it was after dark, but the assistant DA stayed late and met me in a side conference room. We laid everything out on the table and walked through it line by line. "This isn't just unethical," he said. "This is criminal. Mail fraud, wire fraud, maybe conspiracy to commit real estate fraud if we can link the developer directly." "You'll find that link," I said. "They've been too clumsy." He nodded. "We'll issue subpoenas by the end of the week. If this developer's involved, they'll fold fast." They always do. The next morning, I was back on my porch, watching the sun inch over the pine trees when I saw a small crowd gathering across the street. 3 board members and 2 other residents I recognized, all huddled in anxious conversation. Caldwell was there pacing. Marlene was not. A few hours later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the HOA office's gravel lot. Not fast, not lights on, just the quiet, firm arrival of someone delivering consequences. By sunset, The neighborhood group chat was flooded with screenshots of the sheriff going through filing cabinets inside the HOA building, escorted by a county investigator. No one knew exactly what was going on, but the panic was spreading like wildfire. That evening, my neighbor, a carpenter named Will who'd never had a single good thing to say about the HOA, walked up my driveway holding a six-pack. "You really went to war with them," he said, handing me a bottle. "No," I replied. "They went to war with the truth. I just made sure it had better lawyers." He laughed, but it was quiet, the kind of laugh you reserve for realizing the fight might finally be over. We sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. It was the first night in weeks no one interrupted me, no clipboard, no threats. Just the sound of wind through the trees and the slow unraveling of a scheme too rotten to hold. By Thursday morning, the air in the neighborhood felt different, not tense, not panicked, but watchful. Like everyone was waiting for the next domino to fall. I spent most of the day reviewing property line data at the zoning office, preparing for the inevitable backlash. Every time a corrupt board gets cornered, they don't back down. They scatter, stall, and claw at any technicality they can twist. Around mid-afternoon, I got a call from the assistant DA. "They're trying to backdate filings," he said without preamble. "Someone accessed the HOA's digital records last night and entered a trail of fabricated meeting notes, all time-stamped a month ago. Our forensics team caught it within the hour." "Let me guess," I said. "They're trying to make the fake vote look legitimate. Worse, they inserted language suggesting you gave verbal consent to the boundary expansion, twice." I didn't answer right away. Not because I was surprised, but because I was calculating. "I've never spoken to any of them about expansion," I finally said, "and we both know verbal consent doesn't override property law." "They know it too," he replied. "But if they can create enough confusion, they think they'll buy time." I looked out over the back half of my property. The cabin stood quiet among the pines, untouched since the day I finished it. Its windows reflected the tree line, not a single sign of the chaos unfolding just beyond it. "They're setting themselves up for obstruction," I said. "That's what we're counting on." The next morning, a county IT specialist arrived with a warrant to clone the HOA's local server. Word spread fast. By noon, residents were gathered near the mailbox kiosk, whispering. Some of them had been loyal to the board for years, but even they couldn't ignore the presence of two unmarked sedans and a plainclothes investigator carrying a laptop bag into the HOA office. Later that evening, Will knocked on my door again. He didn't bring beer this time. Just a folder in one hand and a question on his face. "You ever seen this?" he asked, handing me the packet. "It was in my mailbox, no stamp, just dropped in." I flipped it open. A glossy brochure for a planned community development complete with digital renderings, curved streets, gated entrances, designer landscaping. The name of the project was stamped across the top, "Preserve at Silver Hollow." My stomach dropped. "They're not just trying to expand the HOA," I said. "They're trying to dissolve it." Will frowned. "How's that make sense?" "They annex the land, absorb our parcels under the existing HOA charter, then sell the whole block to the developer. The HOA dissolves under a merger clause and the new community gets built under a fresh set of bylaws. Clean slate. No legal baggage. But that's illegal," I cut in, "unless every affected homeowner agrees in writing, which they won't." I pulled out the map from the folder. Sure enough, the lots were redrawn. My land was shown as Greenbelt Reserve C. Will's house and 10 others were listed as Phase 1 redevelopment zone. "They planned this down to the square foot," he muttered. "They didn't count on anyone reading the fine print." That night, I drove to the county courthouse again. This time, I wasn't delivering evidence, I was pulling public records on the developer. Their corporate filings, real estate transactions, and more importantly, their zoning requests. One document stood out, a pending appeal for fast-track construction approval, contingent on community unification under a single governing body. There it was in legalese. They were using the HOA as a Trojan horse. The next morning, I requested a hearing with the County Land Commission. Emergency session. I attached every file I had, cross-referenced with timestamps, and submitted it under my zoning board credentials. By end of day, I had a time slot confirmed. Tuesday morning, public session. I spent the weekend gathering support. House by house I knocked. I didn't pitch drama. I showed proof, emails, maps. The development plans that rebranded people's homes as redevelopment assets. One neighbor, an Army vet with a flagpole and a no-nonsense attitude, stared at the papers for a long moment, then said, "They're gonna regret screwing with the wrong people." By Monday, almost 20 households had signed a petition calling for the suspension of all HOA authority pending investigation. Not symbolic, legally binding under our bylaws, which allowed for emergency suspension by simple majority if fraud was suspected. I had just finished collecting the last signature when Caldwell appeared again. She didn't come up the driveway this time. She waited at the sidewalk, arms folded, eyes tracking me like a hawk. I walked down to meet her. "Anything you need to say," I told her, "say it now. You're not going to get another chance." She held out a folded letter. "This is a formal notice of censure. The board has voted to revoke your community privileges pending review of your conduct." I didn't take the paper. "You don't have the authority," her lips pressed thin. "You've undermined the HOA's governance. You've illegally accessed protected records. You've incited hostility." I took a step closer, voice low. "You tried to erase my property rights to sell this land out from under us. You fabricated documentation, backdated minutes, and lied to the county. What you're standing on is quicksand. The board will defend itself," she said. "We have legal counsel." "Not anymore," I replied. "Daniel Withers was disbarred this morning, conflict of interest. He was on the developer's payroll." Her face drained of color. She turned and walked away without another word. Tuesday came fast. The Land Commission chamber was packed. Homeowners, press, a few developers in tailored suits trying to look relaxed. I wore a flannel shirt, jeans, and brought a binder 2 inches thick. When my name was called, I stood at the podium and began. I didn't accuse. I demonstrated. I showed the timeline. The forged records. The emails between the HOA president and the developer. The altered server logs. The real estate filings. Then I played the voicemail. It was left on Will's phone by accident, a pocket dial from one of the board members during a meeting. In it, you could clearly hear Marlene say, "Once we get Grant's land marked as Greenbelt, we can bulldoze the cabin. He won't be able to stop it." The room went silent. The commission chair leaned forward. "And you're certain this was unapproved expansion territory?" I handed him the original boundary certificate signed by the county clerk years ago. Then I handed him the fake one stamped last month with mismatched signatures. He didn't ask another question. Within the hour, the commission voted unanimously to freeze all HOA authority, suspend development permits, and refer the matter to the state attorney general. Outside, reporters gathered around Caldwell, who tried to shield her face as questions flew. Someone shouted her name. She didn't answer. Will clapped me on the shoulder. "You ever think about running for mayor?" "No," I said. "But I wouldn't mind chairing the new HOA once we build it from scratch," he grinned. "Fair. Long as you promise not to fine me for my shed. As long as it doesn't talk back, you're clear." That night, I walked the full stretch of my land. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. They'd built their empire on forged signatures, fake authority, and arrogance. I built my case on facts, and facts, unlike fences, aren't so easily torn down. 2 days after the Land Commission hearing, the fallout hit like a rockslide. I was halfway through splitting firewood behind the cabin when a black SUV with government plates rolled up the access road. 2 agents stepped out, neither in uniform, but their presence was unmistakable, calm, clipped movements, eyes that scanned everything twice. "Adler Grant?" the taller one asked. I nodded, setting the axe down. "You hear about the HOA board?" They exchanged a glance. Then the shorter agent opened a leather folder and held out a photo. It showed a man in a blazer shaking hands with one of the developers from the preserve at Silver Hollow Plans. The backdrop was a private golf course nowhere near our county. You recognize the man on the left. That's Clint Shaver, HOA president, lives 2 streets over or used to. He hasn't returned home in 3 days, the first agent said. We have reason to believe he's fled the state. I raised an eyebrow. Fled? 2 days ago, a wire transfer of over $400,000 was flagged moving from the HOA's reserve account to a shell corporation in Nevada. Traced back to Shaver's personal control. I stared at them for a moment, then let out a breath through my teeth. That money was supposed to cover stormwater drainage repairs and emergency maintenance. He used it to bankroll the development. Looks that way. The county's forensic team uncovered multiple fraudulent invoices submitted to the HOA over the past 6 months, all through contractors affiliated with the same real estate firm backing Preserve at Silver Hollow. I've got names, I said, and emails. I'm sure you've already seen most of it, but I'll forward the rest. The agent nodded. We'd appreciate your cooperation. We've also issued a notice to freeze all HOA bank accounts while we investigate further. As the SUV pulled away, I noticed a small group of neighbors gathered near the main road. Word was traveling faster than I could keep up, but people weren't panicking anymore, they were organizing. Later that evening, I met with a handful of residents at the community park pavilion. Will was there, along with a few folks I hadn't spoken to before the mess started. They'd brought folding chairs, notepads, and determination. All right, said a woman with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense tone. We've got a neighborhood with no governing body, funds in limbo, and a half-finished drainage project that backs up every time it rains. Someone needs to take charge. We're not rebuilding the HOA, Will said. Not the way it was. No one's asking for that, I added. But if we let the county appoint a temporary administrator, we lose local say again. We need to elect a provisional council, something small, transparent, accountable. A retired firefighter named Miguel raised his hand. I've got experience with emergency logistics. I'm not interested in politics, but I can help with infrastructure priorities. Perfect, I said. We'll keep it lean, 3 members to start. Just enough to manage essentials and coordinate with the county. I'll handle communications, said the woman with the notepad. We need to get accurate info out before rumors crash the neighborhood app again. By night's end, we had a plan, not a full blueprint but a direction, no badges. No gatekeeping committees, just neighbors stepping up. The next morning, I forwarded the rest of my evidence to the federal agents. It included a new detail I hadn't noticed before. A string of correspondence between Shaver and the developer's legal department, referencing a quiet title action drafted weeks in advance. They were preparing to forcefully convert disputed parcels, including mine, into HOA-aligned lots through legal maneuvering. I flagged it for the agents, who called back an hour later. That document changes the scope, the agent said. They weren't just defrauding the HOA. They were attempting coordinated title theft, federal crime. 2 hours later, an arrest was made in a hotel just outside Reno. Clint Shaver had checked in under a fake name and was found with 2 phones, a laptop loaded with encrypted files, and a briefcase filled with burner credit cards. The Justice Department released a statement the following morning confirming a multi-agency investigation into real estate fraud, embezzlement, and property misappropriation. Once the news hit, the last of the HOA loyalists vanished from public view. Caldwell resigned through an unsigned note slipped under the office door. Marlene. She was spotted loading boxes into a U-Haul before sunrise, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. She'd left behind a ceramic "Bless This Home" sign nailed to her porch. Someone took it down before noon. The county approved our provisional council 2 days later. Miguel coordinated with the Public Works Department to resume drainage repairs, and I helped secure a temporary grant to fund the project until the frozen assets could be legally reclaimed. One afternoon, as I walked the trail behind my property, I found a small envelope tucked between the cabin door and the frame. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, handwritten in blocky cursive. "You don't know me, but I watched what you did. Thank you for not backing down." No name, no signature, just that. I left it pinned to the inside wall of the cabin above the window facing the trees. Weeks passed. Life returned to something resembling normal. Except now, when people passed each other on the road, they stopped to talk. Not just nod, but really talk. Doors stayed open longer, favors got returned faster, and not once did anyone mention bylaws or fines. One afternoon, Will and I stood on the newly repaired culvert bridge watching the water rush below. "You think it's over?" he asked. "For them, yeah," I said. "But for us, it's just starting." He looked over, puzzled. "We've got a clean slate now," I said. "Might as well build something better on it." He nodded, then pointed to the creek. "You ever think about adding a footpath from your cabin across the water?" "Maybe a little pedestrian bridge," I smiled. "Only if no one tries to fine me for the railing design," he laughed. "Deal." That weekend, we started construction, just a few planks and hand tools. No permits, no hearings, just two neighbors building something useful. By the time the first snow came, the bridge was finished. No ceremonies, no ribbon cutting, just solid wood and the sound of boots crossing from one side to the other. And for the first time in a long while, the neighborhood didn't feel like a place we lived in. It felt like a place we owned. Together,